Hey guys, tonight we step softly into a palace corridor where the lamps are dim and every sound seems to fold into silence. The banners above you shift as if stirred by a breath you cannot hear, and in that hush, whispers once guided emperors. Not the booming voices of generals, not the elaborate petitions of ministers, but the quiet presence of inventions that flickered briefly and then slipped away. You probably won't survive the silence of these halls without imagining something moving just beyond the lantern light, because here, silence was never empty. It was filled with devices that blurred the line between science and sorcery. Do you dare to follow me deeper, where a lantern once carried orders into the sky, where a wooden bow repeated its rhythm like falling rain, and where a bronze dragon dropped a single ball to announce the Earth's hidden tremor? These were not the inventions every textbook celebrates. These were the strange, fragile wonders history nearly forgot. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love it if you shared your location and the time where you are listening. Midnight in Toronto, early morning in Sydney, maybe a lazy afternoon in Buenos Aires. Together, we make a constellation of little lanterns across the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine first the Kongming lantern, paper stretched thin around a delicate frame, its flame trembling inside as it climbed upward. To a soldier in the Three Kingdoms, it was not decoration but command, a glowing order written across the night sky. Advance, retreat, regroup, all could be carried by that fragile light. To some it was a beacon of hope, to others, a warning. And in later centuries, what began as strategy drifted into prayer, as families released lanterns like wishes rising into the heavens. Then picture the repeating crossbow, the non-lan chu. Crude to some, ingenious to others, it sacrificed elegance for persistence. A lever and wooden magazine let arrow after arrow fly without pause, relentless as rain. No master's grace was needingly steady hands. On the frontier it promised survival, while in the capital it raised uneasy questions. Was this brilliance, or did it dishonor the skill of archery? Yet in its rhythm we still hear the pulse of human restlessness, reaching for more. And finally the bronze seismoscope of Zhang Heng, a great vessel encircled by dragons, each clutching a pearl. When the earth trembled, one pearl would drop, ringing into a waiting bronze toad. Imagine standing in the chamber, when all felt calm than hearing that sudden sound. Ministers would look at one another, uncertain. Had the earth itself spoken through metal? Was this knowledge, or was it omen? To the scholar, it was science. To the court it was something stranger, both wonder and worry. These three lantern, crossbow, dragonair are companions tonight. None endured like paper or compass. None became pillars of empire. But each carried a spark of human longing, to reach further, to see what cannot be seen, to hear what lies beneath silence. Forgotten by many, yet glowing still in the shadows, they remind us that invention is not only utility, sometimes it is poetry. So breathe with me here. In and out. Let the images settle. A flame lifting paper skyward. A bow clicking like rain. A dragon vessel listening in silence. We are only at the beginning, standing at the threshold of forgotten alcoves. Beyond this corridor more stories wait. Of youth who dared to imagine them. Of courts that praised and feared them. Of decline and transformation into myth. The hall darkens ahead. The air cools. And you and I take the first step into the world where necessity and wonder entwined, and where fragile inventions flickered briefly then vanished into history's hush. Hey guys, tonight we walk a little further down the corridor, and the silence that surrounds us begins to change. You can almost hear the thrum of distant footsteps, the rustle of robes, the faint murmur of voices long gone, and beneath those echoes, something stronger, the pulse of necessity, the kind of quiet pressure that shapes invention, not out of leisure, but out of survival. In ancient China, devices were rarely created for curiosity alone. They were born of hunger, fear, duty, and the strange silence between tremors of the earth. Imagine a world where silk rustled more than paper, where the sky at night was darker than anything we see today, and where messages carried by foot could take weeks to arrive. Picture a general in the borderlands, anxious for word from his scouts. Imagine a farmer waiting for rain, eyes fixed on a sky that gave no hint of when or whether it would come. Think of an emperor in a marble hall, listening for omens in silence, wondering if a tremor meant heaven's warning, or just the earth shifting in its sleep. In each of these scenes, you can feel the same pressure, the need for tools that would shorten the distance between danger and response, between question and answer. The Kongming lantern, the repeating crossbow, the bronze seismoscope, they were not curiosities. They were responses to these quiet demands. Each answered a question, whispered by necessity. How can we send a signal when distance separates us? How can we fight with speed when precision is scarce? How can we know the earth has shifted before disaster arrives at our doors? These were not academic puzzles. They were survival itself. Walk with me through the streets of Chang'an or Luoyang. The markets are crowded, the cries of merchants mixing with the chants of monks and the rattle of wooden wheels over stone. Somewhere in the back rooms, behind stalls heavy with bronze and wood, artisans experiment. A slip of paper coated with oil, a frame of bamboo tied with string, a spark of flame, carefully shielded from the breeze. A small light lifts skyward, fragile and trembling, but rising all the same. A soldier watching from the wall narrows his eye. Could such a glow be used to guide an army at night? In that moment, necessity breathes life into invention. Now step with me into a barracks. The smell of sweat and leather hangs in the air. Soldiers practice with bows, drawing strings back, releasing, drawing again, arms aching, patience thinning. A boy watches and frowns. What if there were a way to shoot without pause? He picks up wood, fiddles with string, imagines a lever, imagines rhythm. He does not dream of elegance. He dreams of surviving the clash of armies, where one pause might mean death. From his hands emerges the first crude shape of the repeating crossbow, born not of artistry, but of urgency. And then, far from battle, in the mind of Zhang Heng, a different necessity murmurs. The earth trembles from time to time, sometimes gently, sometimes with devastation. But how do you know if the tremor is near or far? How do you send warning across distance? He studies the stars, the patterns of rivers, the numbers that weave through nature, and in the quiet, he imagines a vessel, a bronze circle adorned with dragons, each clutching a ball. When the earth shifts, the ball falls. It is a translation of silence into sound, of unseen movement into visible signal. His invention is not about war or territory, it is about knowing, about offering foresight to those who cannot hear the earth themselves. Necessity is the invisible architect behind all these devices. It does not shout, it presses gently, firmly, until hands respond, until minds bend, until something new takes shape. In the palace, emperors may have spoken of omens, but in workshops and fields, men and women lived in the constant tension between what they had and what they needed. The lantern, the crossbow, the seismoscope each was a bridge thrown across that gap. And yet, as we walk deeper into this story, you will notice something curious. Necessity creates, but it does not always protect. Inventions can solve one problem while creating another. The lantern that guided armies could also be copied by enemies. The crossbow that fired quickly lacked the grace of accuracy. The seismoscope that revealed earthquakes also stirred suspicion about whether men were trespassing on heaven's secrets. Necessity gave them birth, but politics, pride, and fear would decide whether they endured. For now, hold the image of those beginnings. The lantern lifting into night, the boy shaping wood into a new kind of bow, the scholar sketching dragons onto bronze. They do not know yet whether their work will be praised or forgotten. They only know the pressure of need, the quiet voice of survival urging their hands to keep moving. Take another breath with me. In and out. Let the hum of necessity settle into you, as if it were a faint drumbeat beneath the silence. These inventions were not accidents. They were responses to the same silence we feel now, the same space where fear and hope live side by side. And if you follow me further, you will see how each of these fragile creations stepped out of their workshops and into the larger stage of history where they would be tested, embraced, doubted, and reshaped. The corridor bends ahead, darker than before. A door waits, carved with dragons and clouds, its hinges heavy with time. Beyond it lies the story of the sky's messenger, the Kongming lantern, lifting above battlefields and into prayer. Let's step closer, for the door is beginning to open. Hey guys, tonight the corridor opens into a wider hall, and the air feels lighter, as if it is carrying a secret upward. Look above, a faint glow, fragile yet steady, rising against the dark. This is the Kongming lantern, the sky's messenger, born of bamboo, paper, and fire. To you it may recall festivals or prayers whispered into night air, But its earliest light was not celebration. It was strategy. It was survival written across the heavens. Picture Zhuge Liang, known as Kong Mingthe, strategist of the Three Kingdoms. He watches the horizon, thinking not only of soldiers and supplies, but of silence, distance, delay. Messages sent by runners could take too long. Horns and drums could be muffled by valleys and forests. But a lantern? A small flame lifting into the sky, visible from ridges and riverbanks that could be read like a silent command. To an army waiting in the dark, one light could mean advance, another retreat. A line of lights could mean regroup, encircle, or escape. To those who understood, the sky itself had become a scroll. Imagine the moment. Soldiers gathered on a frontier hilltop, the night wind cold against their armor. Suddenly, a pale flame lifts into the air. Men straighten, watching it float higher, steady as if guided by unseen hands. They do not cheer, for sound would betray them. They simply move one step, then another, following the command written in fire. In that silence, the lantern is not fragile paper, but authority itself, as binding as the emperor's seal. And yet, the beauty of the Kongming lantern is that it holds two lives. In its first life, it was the strategist's voice, a device of cunning and necessity. In its second, it slipped into gentler hands. Centuries after the wars, families began to release lanterns, not for commands but for prayers. A father lighting one at the turn of the year, asking for his child's health. Lovers releasing them side by side, watching their hopes drift together into the night. Farmers sending them skyward before planting, a wish for rain and harvest. The same fragile paper that once directed armies now carried the softer weight of longing. Breathe with me here. Picture the glow against indigo sky. The slow rise as flame meets air. There is something calming about it, isn't there? The way it drifts without haste, the way it seems both delicate and determined. To watch a lantern ascend is to feel a question rising with it. Will it last? Will the flame endure? And perhaps that is the same question we ask of ourselves. Of course, no invention is without doubt. In its military use, lanterns could be unreliable, caught by winds, extinguished by rain. Enemies could imitate them, sending false signals. Ministers in the palace argued, were they too fragile to trust with life and death? Some dismissed them as toys, better suited for ritual than war. But in that dismissal lay their salvation, because once abandoned by generals, they were embraced by villagers, by poets, by lovers, and so they endured not as weapons, but as symbols. Think of it. The same lantern that might once have meant retreat immediately now meant remember me, or grant me peace. Isn't it curious how society reshapes what it no longer fears? A tool of war becomes an ornament of hope. A strategy becomes a story. That transformation may be the greatest victory of the Kongming lantern, that it escaped the battlefield to find a place in festivals, in memory, in art. You and I stand now at the edge of a lake. The water is still, the sky cloudless. Families gather with quiet hands. One by one, lanterns are lit, their frames trembling until the air fills them with lift. Children watch with wide eyes, mothers whisper blessings, elders bow as the lights rise. Soon the sky is filled, as though stars have descended to hover just above the earth. To stand in such a moment is to feel both small and infinite, both here and beyond. And yet, if you listen closely, you can still hear its first life, the silent command across hills, the strategist's intent rising like fire. That duality lingers in every glow, part war, part prayer, part fear, part hope. It is this layering of meaning that makes the Kongming lantern unforgettable. Take another slow breath. In and out. Let the image of that glow rest in your mind. Imagine holding one yourself, feeling the thin paper warm in your hands. The moment it grows buoyant, the little tug as it wants to rise. You let go. It drifts upward, carrying not only fire but a piece of you. For a moment, you wonder if the sky is reading your message. The hall around us darkens again, but the lanterns still glow above. They lead us forward, guiding us deeper into the world of forgotten inventions. And beyond, another sound waits, not the hush of a lantern, but the relentless rhythm of wood and string. The repeating crossbow is ready to speak, not with light, but with rain. Hey guys, tonight the glow of lanterns fades behind us, and what replaces it is a sharper sound, steady and insistent. Not the soft hush of silk, not the flutter of paper, but the click and snap of wood under tension. You and I are entering the world of the repeating crossbow, the no lian chua device, born not of elegance, but of urgency. Its voice was not a single note but a rhythm, like rain falling hard on a roof, each drop striking faster than you could count. Imagine a training yard in the Han Dynasty. Soldiers line up, their hands rough, their breath steadying. Traditional bows demand strength, skill, and patience, qualities drilled into them day after day. But then, one soldier steps forward with something different: a stock of wood, a lever, a small magazine of bolts. He pulls, and the mechanism clatters. Bolt after bolt flies, not with the precision of a master archer, but with a relentlessness that surprises everyone watching. Where the bow asks for art, this crossbow asks only for rhythm. One pull, one shot, another pull, another shot. A storm in wood and iron. Close your eyes for a moment. Can you hear it? Click, release, snap, click, release, snap. The air fills with the sound of persistence. To the enemy, it must have felt like being caught in sudden downpour arrows, arriving one after another, too fast to dodge, too many to ignore. To the soldiers holding it, the crossbow was a strange kind of equalizer. Skill mattered less, training mattered less. A farmer could stand beside a warrior and, with the same lever, send a rain of bolts into the night. But as with every invention, admiration carried shadows. Generals who had trained for decades with longbows frowned. Was it honorable to fight with such a crude mechanism? Did it cheapen the skill of archery, the art that had been a symbol of nobility for centuries? Ministers whispered, some calling it clever, others calling it unworthy. A debate unfolded. Should strength and mastery define battle? Or was survival itself reason enough to embrace a new tool? You and I walk through that debate now. In one chamber, an elder commander shakes his head. If every man can fire without art, what becomes of discipline? In another, a younger officer replies, if our borders are defended, does it matter how? The crossbow itself is silent, resting on its wooden stock, as though waiting for history to decide. And yet, the battlefield gave its own verdict. On the frontiers where enemies pressed hard and fast, the repeating crossbow proved its worth. A line of soldiers armed with them could hold a wall longer, could frighten raiders with sheer volume of fire. The accuracy was poor, yes. The bolts were smaller, yes. But the sound, the relentless clatter, could shake courage as surely as any blade. For a time, its rhythm was the Empire's heartbeat. Still, think of the cost. Precision lost, beauty lost. Where the longbow was poetry, the repeating crossbow was prosa, simple, direct, unadorned. And perhaps that is why it never fully claimed the Empire's heart. It was too humble, too practical, too unlike the noble image of the archer beneath painted skies. In palaces, it was remembered as a curiosity. In villages, it lingered as a tool. Step with me now into a small farmhouse near the border. A man keeps one beneath his bed, not polished, not adorned. He does not call it invention, he calls it protection. When wolves prowl or bandits threaten, he lifts it, pulls the lever, hears the familiar click. In that sound lies reassurance. The same device that failed to impress the court endures quietly in the hands of common folk. And centuries later, storytellers would recall it differently still. In folk tales, the crossbow became a symbol of cleverness, of stubborn endurance. It was no longer measured by accuracy, but by its message, that even the ordinary could stand against the storm if given the right tool. Breathe with me here, in and out. Let the sound of those clicks echo softly in your mind. Hear them not as violence, but as rhythm, like raindrops on a roof, like footsteps on a wooden floor. The repeating crossbow's legacy may not be elegance, but it is persistence, the comfort of knowing that even in weakness there can be strength through steady repetition. And notice something else, how each of these inventions, lantern, crossbow, seismoscope, holds a double life. The lantern became poetry after war, the crossbow became legend after dismissal. The vessel would become myth after suspicion. None remained as they began. All were reshaped by time, by people, by memory. The corridor ahead darkens again, and with it the rhythm fades, leaving only silence. But in that silence, something heavy awaits. Not the flicker of paper, not the clatter of wood, but the still breath of bronze dragons, each holding a pearl, ready to drop. The earth itself is about to speak. Hey guys. Tonight the corridor narrows and the air grows very still, as if the walls themselves are holding their breath. The floor cools beneath your feet. Ahead, a chamber opens like a hollow in the mountain. and at its center stands a vessel of bronze circle of dragons, each poised as though about to speak. You and I step closer, and the quiet changes. It is not the silence of emptiness. It is the quiet that waits for a single sound. Look carefully. The body is broad and rounded, the surface chased with clouds and waves. Around the rim, 8 dragons lean outward, each holding a small, pearl-like ball between tongue and teeth. Below, arranged like attentive listeners, 8 bronze toads open their mouths. The arrangement is precise, not decorative. Each dragon faces a direction on the compass. Each toad aligns beneath. The whole instrument seems to breathe a slow, patient breath, as if listening to something beneath our hearing. A court scribe would describe it as Zhang Heng's device, conceived during the Han. A scholar would say it translates the earth's hidden motion into signal. When the ground stirs, a mechanism inside nudges just one dragon's head. A single ball drops. The toad below receives it. The hall answers with a clean, ringing note. To us, that explanation is enough. We do not need to take it apart. What matters is the feeling it gives, the unforgettable clarity of a single sound summoned from a world that otherwise keeps its secrets. Imagine the day it first spoke. The sky over the capital is calm, the air mild. Ministers compose poems about the season. Children chase each other at the edge of the courtyard. Guards shift from one foot to the other. Bored. Then a tiny click. A glint of motion. One ball falls from a western dragon's mouth and strikes the toad. The sound is not loud, but it moves through the chamber like a bell dropped into deep water. Heads turn. Nothing else stirs. The floor does not shudder. The screens do not tremble. Yet the vessel says, something has happened to the West. What do you do with knowledge that arrives before proof? One minister scoffs. Another's face tightens. The emperor's eyes are hard to read. He gestures for riders. Messengers leave the capital with orders to inspect riverbanks, granaries, bridges. Days pass. Dust on the horizon becomes men on lathered horses. Reports slide across the floor into the throne's shadow. Villages shaken, walls cracked. A temple roof collapsed in a place far to the west. Relief, unease, and a hush settled together. The dragons were right. The earth spoke. The instrument listened. Breathe with me here. In and out. Let your mind rest on that single, bright sound. This is what the device offers. A brief mastery of distance. A gentle theft of time from disaster. In a world where news moves at the speed of feet and hooves, to gain a day is to gain lives. Water can be diverted from broken embankments, grain moved from damaged storehouses, healers sent where they are needed. No one bows to the instrument as if to a god. They bow to the duty it makes possible. Still, the chamber is not free of doubt. Some whisper that heaven reveals in its appointed hour, and that to seek early knowledge is to grab at the sleeve of the cosmos. Others fear ridicule. What if next time the ball falls and no quake is found? Is the vessel at fault? Or is the search too shallow, the distance too great? The instrument lives where science and omen share a border. That border, in a palace, is never quiet for long. Zhang Heng understands this. He is not trying to steal secrets from the sky. He is trying to give the throne a better ear to the ground. He frames the device as service, not challenge an attentive clerk of the earth. Nothing more. He explains calmly that a mechanism can feel what flesh cannot, and that warning does not invoke disaster. It honors responsibility. He speaks softly, and in that softness is courage. The court, for a time, listens back. Walk with me around the vessel. Run your eyes over the dragon's scales, the way each eye is cast to watch a different horizon. Think of the mechanism with not gears as you and I might imagine, but levers and weights responding the way a reed answers a ripple. The poetry is not in ornament. It is in the translation of silence into signal. This is what makes the instrument beautiful, even if no one hangs silk on it or paints it with vermilion. It takes the invisible and renders it gently visible. Beyond the palace, the story changes shape and becomes a lullaby. In villages, old women tell children about the day a bronze dragon spat out a pearl to warn of distant shaking. A child falls asleep to that image and dreams of dragons listening through the floor. The tale is not precise, as tales seldom are, but it keeps the idea alive. The earth speaks before it shouts. Someone with patience can hear it. In temples, a monk taps a bell once, lightly, and calls it compassion, a small sound given early, to spare a greater sound later. Of course, the instrument has limits. It cannot rebuild walls, cannot hold roofs together, cannot stop mountains from shrugging. Sometimes, after long calm, the balls do not fall for months. That is not failure. Sometimes the ground moves slowly, like a thought it cannot finish. That is not failure, either. Tools that serve listening must accept long silence. If they demanded constant drama, they would no longer be instruments but spectacles. Now consider a different kind of tremor, ones that pass through people. A minister hides worry beneath ceremony. A farmer carries fear in his shoulders when the sky turns the wrong color. A child feels the shiver of a household where words have grown sharp. The seismoscope offers us a metaphor for living. Attend to the small motion before the collapse. Notice the tiny drop before the landslide. If you can hear the first note, you can soften what follows. This, too, is a form of foresight, and it requires the same qualities as Zhang Heng's bronze: patience, humility, and an ear tuned to quiet. Take another breath, in and out. Let the chamber's cool air settle through your shoulders. The dragons do not speak now. They do not need to. Knowing they might is enough to change the way you stand in the world. You become the kind of person who listens beneath the noise, who feels for the faint shift under the floorboards of a story, a city, a life. But palaces are not made only of chambers and instruments. They are made of people, and people bring weather with them, gusts of approval, drafts of suspicion, eddies of rumor. As word of the dragon vessel spreads, smiles and frowns travel with it. In council halls, men arrange their robes and choose their words carefully. In the inner apartments, behind screens and silk, the story softens into a different shape. A pearl falling from a dragon's mouth, a sign received by those who cannot walk beyond the walls. The note that rang in this chamber carries outward, through corridors where politics gathers like a storm, and rooms where whispers are the language of power. We will follow it. Ahead, the air warms, scented with incense and lacquer. Footsteps fade, fans stir, voices lower. The dragons fall silent, and another kind of listening begins. Hey guys, tonight the bronze dragons fade behind us, and what replaces their stillness is a different kind of trembling. Not of the earth this time, but of human voices, low and careful, weaving through incense smoke. The palace is alive with whispers. Step with me into its shadowed corridors, and you'll feel it too, sense that every glance might carry meaning, every pause might alter fate. Here, inventions do not live or die by their cleverness alone. They pass instead through the weather of politics and the subtle winds of rumor. Imagine the council hall. Its roof beams are painted with coiled phoenixes, its floor polished to a mirror sheen. Ministers gather in layered robes, their expressions measured. In the center, a scroll is unrolled, diagrams drawn by a restless hand, a paper lantern that climbs skyward, a crossbow that fires without pause, a bronze vessel adorned with dragons. The words are quiet, but the stakes are not. One voice praises, "This will safeguard our borders." Another warns, "This invites heaven's wrath." Or worse, enemy imitation. The emperor listens, but his silence is louder than any opinion. In palaces, silence is never empty. It is a tool sharper than steel. Now turn with me into the harem's chambers. Here the debate takes on a different form. Silk curtains drift, lamps glow amber, and women lean close to their attendants. They have not held crossbows. They have not inspected dragon vessels. Yet stories reach them, twisted by distance, embroidered with curiosity. One concubine whispers to another, "Did you hear? A lamp flew like a star into the night. Was it a prayer or a warning?" The whisper spreads faster than edicts. Soon the lantern is no longer a military device but a symbol of longing, of fate, of hidden intention. What the council calls strategy, the harem recasts as poetry. In another chamber, word of the repeating crossbow slips under the doors. A lady's family has soldiers on the frontier, and she hears that one man now can send many arrows without pause. To her, it is not mechanism. It is a shadow over her household. Each arrow is a question. Will her brother return, or will his name be spoken in mourning? What generals debate as honor or dishonor becomes, in her silk-wrapped silence, fear and prayer. And then the tale of the seismoscope arrives, pared down to its most magical image. There is a vessel, someone says, with dragons that drop pearls when the earth stirs. The women picture not levers and weights, but golden creatures listening through the floor. To them it feels like sorcery, or perhaps protection, something that might guard them in their confinement when they cannot run if the ground shakes. They never see the bronze instrument itself, yet they keep its image alive, in poems sung to children, in verses embroidered into cloth. Do you see what is happening? In the palace, inventions are tested twice. once in the open glare of politics, and once in the softer shadow of rumor. Ministers weigh utility against superstition. Concubines transform mechanisms into metaphors. And both trials matter. A tool dismissed in council may be immortalized in story. A device admired in chamber may wither if it offends a jealous rival. The palace is a crucible, but not one of fire. It is a crucible of silence, glances, and whispers. Breathe with me here. In and out. Let the hum of those whispers drift through you. Notice how easily truth bends. A lantern becomes a symbol of rebellion, or a prayer for reunion. A crossbow becomes either savior of borders or threat to honor. A dragon vessel becomes a guardian spirit or a dangerous omen. None of these images are wrong, but none are whole. In a palace, meaning is always a fractured mirror. And what of the inventors themselves? Picture a scholar standing just outside these chambers, waiting to be called in. His hands smell of ink and bronze, his robes are simple. He knows the device he carries was shaped with care, with logic, with patience. Yet he also knows that once it leaves his hands, it will live or die according to moods he cannot predict. Will the emperor smile? Will a rival whisper against him? Will a concubine weave the device into a song that softens its edges or into a warning that sharpens its danger? It is no wonder that some inventions, no matter how brilliant, faded into silence. The palace could applaud one day and forget the next. Intrigue was as powerful as ingenuity. Even brilliance could vanish behind a folding screen if the wrong person frowned at the wrong hour. Take another breath. In and out. Let the images settle. Ministers leaning over scrolls, concubines murmuring by candlelight, an inventor waiting outside heavy doors. These are not battles of steel, but battles of perception, fought in silence and suggestion. And it is here, in these shadows, that many inventions truly lived or quietly died. Ahead, the corridor darkens again, the whispers recede, and the air grows cooler. The path leads not to debate or rumor, but to something more inevitable: time itself. In the next hall, the glow of inventions will begin to fade, their triumphs slipping into twilight. Their shapes will soften into memory, their purposes rewritten by those who came after. The lanterns will float again, but as wishes. The crossbows will rest, but as relics. The dragons will fall silent, but as legends. And together, we will step into that twilight to see how brilliance declines not in shouts, but in sighs. Hey guys, tonight the path curves again, and the air feels heavier, as though dust itself has begun to settle on everything we've seen. Lanterns, crossbows, dragon vessels all had their moments in the light. But even the brightest flame falters, even the loudest rhythm fades, even the most startling sound becomes memory. This hall we enter now is twilight, the place where inventions that once startled the world grow dim, not with destruction, but with gentle forgetting. Picture the Kongming lantern at its height. On the frontier, generals boasted of how one glow in the sky could move entire armies. In the capital, scribes recorded it as proof of cleverness, strategy, and foresight. For a season, it was more than paper. It was authority, a signal of command. Yet, twilight began as winds shifted. Enemies learned to copy the light or ignore it. Ministers who once praised its cleverness began to dismiss it as fragile, more beautiful than useful. Slowly, the lantern was set aside in council chambers and, quietly reborn in villages, weddings, New Year prayers, harvest festivals. The lantern lived on, no longer a command but a wish. Twilight did not erase it. Twilight transformed it. Now listen for the crossbow. At its peak, its rhythm was frightening. Enemies faltered under its storm, soldiers on the frontier gained courage from its relentless beat. Generals carried stories of its triumphs back to the court, and for a short while it was honored as savior. But glory like that rarely endures. Trained archers scorned it. Ministers muttered that it was crude. And when battles quieted, the repeating crossbow seemed less miracle and more nuisance, too inaccurate, too inelegant. In twilight, it slipped out of palaces, but not out of lives. Farmers along the border still kept them, tucked into corners of homes, used for defense against wolves or raiders. The court forgot its inventor's name, but in villages, it endured as a humble safeguard. And the seismoscopia, the bronze vessel of dragons. At its height, a single falling ball commanded awe, even reverence. The emperor himself paused to listen. Ministers bowed to its clarity, and Zhang Heng's name spread with respect. But twilight came quietly, too complex to maintain, too mysterious for those who preferred omens. Too heavy to move, it rested more and more often in stillness. When it did not speak, suspicion grew. Some whispered it had failed. Others shrugged and called it ornament. In time, it gathered dust in corners, remembered more as curiosity than as tool. Yet the story lived on in whispers, dragons that listened, pearls that fell, the earth itself speaking. Twilight did not destroy it. Twilight carried it into myth. Take a breath here. In and out. Let the softness of decline settle into you. There is no crash, no shattering, no fire, only sighs, shrugs, and silence. The palace turned its gaze elsewhere. And yet, beyond the walls, common folk and storytellers kept their own versions alive. For them, twilight was not an end, but a change of color. Look around this hall. Do you see how the light fades? Not abruptly, but gradually, like dusk seeping through a window. In one corner, lanterns float upward, no longer feared but cherished. In another, a crossbow leans against a farmer's wall, not glorious but steady. In another, a dragon vessel rests in shadow, its story told as a lullaby. Twilight wraps them gently, not as condemnation but as rest. And there is something else here. Twilight carries a lesson about invention itself. What matters is not only whether a tool endures in its original form, but whether it finds a second life in memory, in ritual, in symbol. Paper was invention, poetry was what people made of it. A lantern was invention, prayer was what people turned it into. A crossbow was invention, legend was its afterlife. A seismoscope was invention, myth was its echo. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine dusk over an ancient city. Lanterns flicker along rooftops, not signals but blessings. In a farmhouse, a family sits by the glow of a small fire, a crossbow leaning quietly nearby. In the capital, a child falls asleep to the story of dragons that listen for tremors. None of these inventions are celebrated in textbooks, but they breathe, softly, in twilight. So breathe with them, in and out. Feel how twilight does not erase, but transforms. Each forgotten invention becomes not failure, but a different kind of survival. And in their fading, they remind us of something tender, that usefulness is not the only path to immortality. Sometimes, memory itself is enough. The corridor ahead narrows now, and a faint light returns. It is softer than before, not the blaze of triumph, not the sharpness of debate, but the glow of legacy. These inventions may have declined, but their echoes ripple outward, refusing to vanish entirely. Lanterns rise in prayer, crossbows hum in folktales, dragon vessels stir in scholars' imagination centuries later. Twilight is not the end. It is the beginning of legacy. Let's step together into that legacy, where forgotten inventions glow once more not as tools, but as symbols that continue to guide, comfort, and inspire. Hey guys, tonight the Twilight Hall gives way to something gentler still. The air ahead is warmer, carrying a faint fragrance of oil and paper, as if reminding us that even what has faded can glow again. This is the chamber of legacies, where inventions once dismissed or forgotten rise once more not as weapons or tools, but as symbols woven into the quiet fabric of culture. First, the lantern. No longer a signal of command, no longer a fleeting wartime strategy. In villages and towns it became an offering, a poem, a gesture. Released into the night sky, it carried prayers and hopes, messages not of armies but of families. A bride and groom let one go together, watching their wish for happiness drift upward. Children scribbled dreams onto thin paper, parents lit flames with trembling fingers, and together they watched their thoughts become stars. Even now, centuries later, when you see a lantern glowing against the dark, you are looking at the afterlife of invention. It is history softened into ritual, utility transformed into beauty. Then, the repeating crossbow. In palaces it lost favor, but in border villages it never vanished. Families taught their children how to craft simple versions, easy to build and easier to use. Against wolves in the forest, against raiders on lonely roads, it offered reassurance. Over time, it slipped from empire into folklore. No longer a miracle weapon, it became instead a story of resilience, a reminder that endurance can be as valuable as elegance. In songs and tales, the crossbow's rhythm was remembered not as crude, but as steady, like rain that nourishes fields. Its legacy lay not in power, but in persistence. And finally, the seismoscope. The original device was lost, but the story of Zhang Heng's dragons endured. Scholars centuries later marveled that long before modern seismographs, A man in ancient China had already imagined listening to the earth itself. Children grew up with tales of dragons dropping pearls when the ground trembled. Poets compared the fall of a ball to a sudden truth, revealed without warning. And in laboratories of later ages, scientists whispered Zhang Heng's name with respect, knowing he had dreamed in bronze what they would one day build in steel. Its legacy was not in survival of the object, but in survival of the idea that even the earth has a voice, if only we give it a mouth. Take a breath with me here. In and out. Notice how each invention's second life is softer but no less powerful. Lanterns became hope, crossbows became resilience, dragons became knowledge. None endured exactly as their makers intended, but all endured nonetheless. And in that endurance, there is comfort. It tells us that nothing is entirely lost not if it is remembered, retold, reshaped by those who come after. Now, consider what this means for us. You and I are standing centuries away, and yet tonight we walked through those corridors, touched those inventions with our imagination, and kept them alive for a little while longer. Isn't that a kind of legacy too? That we can hold a story like a lantern, pass it hand to hand, and watch it glow again? Imagine now a festival night. Hundreds of lanterns rise at once, turning the sky into a moving constellation. Somewhere in a village, a crossbow rests quietly, a symbol of survival more than battle. Somewhere in a scholar's study, a scroll still mentions Zhang Heng, the man who listened to the earth. And here, in this quiet hour, you carry all three with you, in thought, in memory, in dream. History is not only what survives in stone and steel, it is also what endures in whispers, in rituals, in the calm spaces before sleep. The inventions we called forgotten were not lost. They were transformed. They continue not in armies or courts but in softer places, festivals, folk tales, bedtime stories like this one. So let's pause together. In and out. Feel the lantern glow in your chest, the crossbow's rhythm in your breath, the dragon's patience in your stillness. This is their gift, carried across centuries, given to you tonight. And now, the corridor ends, the palace fades. What remains is your own room, your own breath, your own night. But the legacies linger, like embers that refuse to die, forgotten inventions that continue to glow on. And so, my friend, we come gently to the close of tonight's walk. The lanterns that once commanded armies now rise in silence above festivals, carrying wishes instead of orders. The crossbow that once rattled battlefields now rests quietly in folktales and memories of resilience. The bronze dragon vessel that once startled ministers with its sudden chime now lives as inspiration for science and as a story told to children. Each, in its way, shows us that invention is never only about utility, it is about meaning, and meaning does not die when tools are set aside. It lingers, reshaped, softened, but alive. As you lie here now, let your breath slow. Picture a lantern drifting upward, its glow steady, its flight calm. Picture the rhythm of rain against a roof, echoing the crossbow's persistence. Picture the drop of a pearl into bronze, a single note that spreads outward into silence. These images are yours to keep, quiet companions for your night. You do not have to remember every detail, every date, every name. What matters is the feeling that even in a world of noise and forgetting, small lights endure. They are waiting for you whenever you choose to recall them. Tonight, you carried them with you, and in doing so, you gave them life again. So close your eyes if you haven't already. Let the hum of your fan, the softness of your pillow, the rhythm of your breath carry you further. History does not end, it only settles, like lanterns across a dark sky. May sleep carry you gently through the night, with lanterns, crossbows, and dragons watching quietly in the distance.